Hello everyone and welcome to episode 28 of EV Brief, your weekly news brief on electric vehicles, sustainable transport and renewable energy from Australia and around the world. I'm your host Jonathan McFeet, and on this week's show, EV Brief is in conversation with Greg McGarvie, the Managing Director of Australian EV startup ACV. Greg is bringing a range of composite-bodied, flat-packed commercial electric vehicles to market in 2021, and we caught up recently via Zoom. Greg, well, I'm here joined by Greg McGarvie, the Managing Director of ACV. Greg, thanks for joining us on EV Brief today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Great.
Along to have a bit of a chat.
Looking forward to it. Now, look, can you give us a little bit of a history about ACV in Australia?
Certainly. I think the strength of our business is our partners offshore. We've got German and Taiwanese technology partners, and we met them about 5 years ago. So we've been working on this for going into our fifth year. And we've got out of Germany Gerhard Kerr, quite skilled. He's very modest. He calls himself a mechanic, but he led the development of the fibre-reinforced plastic division for Benz. And now he's probably reputably one of the leading developers of composite production technology. There's been plenty of composites used in racing cars, and it's now starting to be used in electric vehicles as well. And we feel like we've got some of the best people on side there. And then our Taiwanese partner, Dr. Charles Kung, no slouch. He's a nuclear engineer, but he was the chief engineer for high-speed rail that runs the length of Taiwan, and also a leading manager in one of the leading autos in Taiwan that manufacture components for Toyota. So on those two sides, we've got some high quality and real technical expertise, and we were fortunate enough to be introduced to them. And here we are today, where next year we'll be setting up our manufacturing facility in South Australia with a goal by 2025 of a minimum of 24,000 units a year, more likely to be up around 50. And at that stage, assembly pods located around the world that are manufacturing, building up or assembling our smart packs that are sent offshore.
That's a huge coup for ACV to have such international talent, isn't it, at the sort of early stages of the business?
Oh, we're just very lucky to be introduced by the right people, and that's all it was.
Yeah. They obviously see something really worthwhile in your product offering, though, and in what you can do.
Well, we lay a lot of the work here in Australia, and as you're probably aware, we built our first vehicle here, or assembled our first vehicle here last March in Brisbane. It was just done in a normal workshop at the Motor Trades Association of Queensland. 6 days.
Wow.
We flew in a mechatronics engineer from Germany, and he only spoke German, so we've had to get a local engineer that spoke German and English. Between them, they built the car. Drove it out on the 7th day, so it was almost a religious experience. And then I videoed it on my iPhone, put it on LinkedIn. The next 5 days had over 21,000 views, so I thought, well, we must be onto something here. And then the next day, it featured sitting beside a Tesla and all the other electric vehicles that are available in Australia at an event called Carmageddon, which was put on by the Motor Trades Association of Queensland. And the Science Minister, Karen Andrews, sat in the vehicle and said, what a ripper. Isn't it good to see local Australian business doing something like this? And now, as you know, the federal government has come on board with a grant for the energy management side of the vehicle.
Yeah.
We're running that bi-directional trial.
We can come to that a little bit later, if that's okay. But why don't we have a little rundown of your product offerings, just for our viewers, so people have a sense of what ACV is about.
Certainly. The main focus for our vehicle is last mile urban delivery. It's not a vehicle that's meant to run between cities. It's meant to last mile urban delivery, and it's small, but not real small. If you wanted to link it to a similar vehicle, it's a similar size to the Kangoo, also a similar size to the Subaru Brumby, the Ute. So it's actually a little bit bigger than the Subaru Brumby. So it's a nifty little vehicle, inexpensive to run. Running costs are less than a third of a fossil fuel vehicle. And of course, it's we've got the three models. We've got the cargo, which is a small van. We have the ute, and then later on we have the second family car, which is an urban. And and a great beauty about them, they don't steal your oxygen. They don't replace it with toxic exhaust.
That's it. And I guess, you get a lot of people saying, oh, why is the range of these sorts of vehicles, so low? Obviously you've got to try and explain to people, well, firstly, what do businesses who are buying these products actually need? And the majority of these businesses, they're doing, short stop-start trips in the city. Their payload is decreasing as they complete their shifts, which often just a morning or an afternoon. And then obviously cost is a factor as well. So it sounds like what you're aiming for around that 200 to 250 kilometre range is absolutely perfect for couriers and sort of all the Amazon deliveries and things that are happening in Australia.
Yeah, no, we think it'll match pretty well. We probably should put you on as a salesman. You've got all the right points there. But,
well, I spent a lot of time having to rebut silly arguments from people. But, living...
Well, look, and look, the simplest one really is you say, okay, you've got a fossil fuel vehicle at home. How often a week do you actually fill it?
Yeah.
And most people say, oh, once a week, twice a week.
Yes.
And the reality is the average punter is only doing about 38 kilometres a day.
Right, that's it. So, that's it. I think 70%, according to the ABS, 70% of commutes in Australia are that 38 kilometres a day, And with the pandemic, of course, that's changing even more.
True. And the thing is that you just treat it like a mobile phone. We actually think it's a smartphone on wheels with a big battery.
Yes.
You bring it, plug it in, and most days, by the time you've finished your evening meal, it'll be full.
Yeah.
And the great advantage, the car fills at home. You don't have to go hunting off for a fuel station or trying to find one that's cheaper than the others, because you always got a set price out of your power point at home.
And that's what people, I think, who sort of aren't familiar with EVs don't get. Sure, it's quicker to fill up an internal combustion engine, but you've got to go, oh, have I got fuel? I've got to go to the fuel station. It's 10, 15 minutes sort of minimum to get there. You've got to queue up, pay, go in, get dirty, Whereas this thing,
right.
whether it's a business or whether it's at home, it's always ready to go unless someone forgets to switch it on. Yeah. So in terms of the ute and the cargo, what sort of payload capacity are we looking at?
Look, at present, the current ones are looking at 500 kilo.
Right.
Yeah, and then we've got new models coming in. We call the Transformer series, and they're a slightly bigger version, and they'll have more capability in those areas. But first thing is to get our Series 3, and this you probably remember Ernst Tomke and the smart car. Well, Gerhardt was involved with that in 2000.
Okay.
And so that's why our car's got a little bit of that smart car genetics about it.
Yes.
It's a Series 3.
And I guess the thing is with an electric drivetrain and batteries, we are sort of changing, or you are changing the design of the vehicle as we know it, because you don't need, these long fronts and complicated structures to house these compact electric motors, do you?
No, look, and the beauty of our vehicle is the turning circle.
Yes.
It's just phenomenal, because you're not constrained by a motor in the front of the vehicle. And it's got a great turning circle, great acceleration, and the vehicle itself is only 1,000 kilo, just over 1,000 kilo. That includes the battery.
So obviously good efficiency, good power to weight ratio, and obviously good energy consumption with a low rate. What sort of battery are we talking? Can you talk a bit about the energy side of things?
Sure. At the present, the standard battery, and probably a new series will have a 40 kilowatt hour battery in it, but the standard battery is a 30 kilowatt hour, and effectively flat normal running conditions between 12 and 14 kilowatts per 100 kilometres.
Right.
Now, I've got a partner who drives a Lexus, and it does 12 litres per 100 kilometres. So you turn that 12 litres into dollars, and you can see the difference. And whereas you turn out 12 kilowatts into dollars, and it's 36 cents a kilowatt hour at the metre, so it's $3.60.
That's huge.
Whereas if you,
That's huge. And then, obviously, if you start looking at businesses that have warehouses and that sort of thing, as the price of solar comes down, it's going to be make good business sense for people to actually have renewables on their business, charging their vehicles for free. They'll probably realise a much better quicker break-even point than home consumers, right?
Yeah, no, dead right. And I mean, as you know, Australia's got one of the highest penetrations of solar anyway.
Yes.
And with with our vehicle to grid trial, it actually has got special technology in there that will balance out the home solar, home storage, whatever exists.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, since you bring that up, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? You've just been awarded $5 million from the federal government, which is pretty huge, I think, in the EV manufacturing space, because the federal government at the moment hasn't really been known for supporting new technology. So it's great to see that you're at the forefront of this.
And look, I think I can appreciate the nervousness, because most people think we're the auto industry. We're not.
Yeah.
We're nothing like the
Yeah.
industry. We're really an energy management solution, and it just happens to have wheels and seats and provide very cheap transport. And our vehicle to grid trial is significant because it's a world first. We know that. We've been told by our UK partners, and they do a lot of grid advice to Australia, to the Australian networks. And it's effectively AC, bidirectional, and onboard meter and charger.
Okay.
What that means is the metering is in the vehicle. So you drive the meter, drive the vehicle, you know how much it's going to cost you. And the other thing that's very useful for the grid is they know where the energy is moving around the grid, because that has a big impact on transmission and the likes. And the beauty of it too is that if, say, a natural disaster under our energy mesh and ecosystem, the vehicle could be called up, and a swarm of vehicles could go to where the disaster is and either use their 240 volt plug-in connection or plug in normally with their battery in the households.
So there are other vehicle to grid trials around the world, I think, but is this the first AC one that's taking place?
It's a first AC one with an onboard charger. And there are other AC trials underway and being developed, by some of the bigger vehicle groups. And so the unique thing about it is the onboard charger and meter. We think that's an amazing opportunity. And the plan is that the vehicle, if I came around to your place and plug the vehicle in, before it even does anything, it'll check your circuitry and work out what load it can take. And let's say you've got your air conditioner running and other things running, well, it'll drop the load down so it's not heating up your wire.
Wow. And is all that software being designed in Australia?
No, some of it. We've got a clever team leading it in Australia. But some of the best software engineers are obviously in this area aren't in Australia.
Yeah.
The best.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, hopefully, the opportunities are limitless for all the technology surrounding batteries, energy storage, electric vehicles in this country if we actually start putting money into it now, aren't they?
Yeah. Look, in Australia, with this particular vehicle and our solution, Australia could be a global leader. Now, I know because we're being approached by other countries now that want to take our assembly pods and start assembling these vehicles in their countries. And and we've had to increase the amount of money that we've put up for the factory in South Australia in preparation for that growth.
So tell us a little bit about the manufacturing concept behind your vehicles and the future site, the current site in South Australia.
Well, I can't tell you too much.
Okay.
A lot of it's secret group.
If there's anything you can reveal, we'd love to hear.
But I can reveal, and you've probably seen the video on the website that shows you how the vehicle's assembled. Very clever. It's 100% composite, so effectively it's chemically welded, and it's 14 components. I call them bones instead of a chassis, but effectively it's what the auto industry calls a chassis. That's 2 to 3 times stronger than the equivalent in metal, very light, and that skeleton is actually meant to last probably as long as you. And if you get sick of the appearance of the vehicle, you just change the skins, as long as it doesn't impact the ANCAP rating.
So the exciting thing is Australia, with the recent ACT election, we've seen a real shift towards governments and New South Wales as well wanting to have a sort of carbon neutral position.
And don't forget South Australia, they've just made a big change.
And South Australia, and I think the world knows South Australia is a leader in terms of the big battery that's been paying dividends literally down there, and also the home battery trial. But we've had a big change over the weekend as well in the US with Biden being elected, and we know that Biden is a champion of new technology and electric vehicles. So I guess what are you seeing for your market over the coming years now here and globally?
Well, I think it's exciting times, a lot of growth, and one of our partners in the vehicle to grid trial is out of California, and he was at campaign the other day when he found the result, but all very positive. And the reality is, if your neighbour is going off and on holidays and spending money on other things other than their vehicle, that soon comes home to roost. That running an electric vehicle is far cheaper. There's more in the household budget to do other things if you run an electric vehicle compared to a fossil fuel vehicle.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Not to mention the emissions as well. I live in the middle of Sydney, and diesel buses and diesel delivery vehicles and things, they're disgusting. Heavy particulates. There's thick soot and things that on the windowsill. We need to start to get rid of that from the transport sector, I think. And these sort of things.
You're dead correct. You're right on the ball there, and that's one of the reasons a lot of the offshore countries are keen on our vehicle, because they bring the vehicle in as a smart pack. They create local jobs. They then put it on the road, and most likely governments and businesses in there prefer to be buying a vehicle that's locally built rather than importing. And it also removes the need for them to import fossil fuels. Plus, they clean up the cities, so it reduces the health costs,
of course,
and reduces the burden on the budget.
Yeah, and I suppose it ultimately becomes an energy security thing as well, because if they can get on top of how they generate their energy, if they've got electric vehicles like this, then fuel security is not an issue.
It is, and there's one thing they can't turn out, and that's the sun. That's our nuclear reactor in the sky, and if you're using renewable energy,
right,
you're home and hosed. And I can tell you, one of the countries that's very keen to be assembling our vehicles, it's totally green. All their electrical energy is green. The only thing they've got that's not, they import vehicles and import oil to run them.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, I think we've seen some positive signs in the last few weeks, even with Australian states doing quite high percentages of renewables during the day. Even so, I think we're getting there. We've had big commitments from Australian states to move towards renewable energy zones and batteries and things, haven't we?
Certainly.
Yeah,
we have. And look, it's really good to see what's happening up in northwest Australia. Where they're going to be generating heaps of electrical energy, maybe plugging in some of the neighbouring countries. Australia is in a very, very good position to be an exporter of energy, clean energy, and I think that'll be a premium for the country.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you would see, quite a big demand for jobs in your field over the next few years.
Yes, yeah. Well, we're thinking even just with our manufacturing, there'll be getting close to 1,000 jobs once we reach peak production, and the new jobs that are going to be created haven't even been thought of at the moment, and there's great opportunity.
Yeah, it's incredible when you say 1,000 jobs, because look, I accept that coal and gas are a big part of our energy mix at the moment, and exports, they're not going anywhere in the short term, but for the billions and billions and billions of dollars we're giving to Adani and things like that, that's 1,000 jobs kind of thing. So if a small business can create 1,000 jobs in a clean sector, manufacturing, that's really incredible. You multiply that by all the other businesses and parts suppliers and things like that, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's true. And it's just like a business. You look at the cost involved in creating jobs, and if there's too much of a subsidy, you're going down a blind alley.
That's right. But at the same time, I think, with any new technology in any country over the last, few centuries, governments have stepped in to help implement that and help the transition. I think whether it's electricity or telephones or things like that, there has been government-led kind of investment.
And that's true, and that's important. The solar industry got its start with subsidies in the early days, but now, because they're so efficient, no subsidy needed.
Yeah, and that's it. A lot of people still don't understand that renewables are now cheaper than fossil fuels. And while the outlay can be quite high for the consumer, the price really is coming down these days. Now, you've also been involved in an autonomy trial, is that correct? Or you're developing some autonomy processes?
Autonomous, yeah. Well, we got contacted by a Melbourne company, quite a clever company. They deal in what's called visual artificial intelligence. And they've got a fancier name than that for it, but I'm just trying to simplify it.
Sure.
And effectively, what we're aiming for is that the vehicle, when you come out into your garage in the morning, we've got another group putting a personality into it. They'll just say, good morning, and recognise you, and say, where do you want to go? And you say, oh, just out of the beach for the day. And it'll open up because it's recognised you, it'll unlock, so you don't need a key or anything else.
Yes.
And it'll probably use a 3-factor recognition, which could be the way you walk, your voice, and face ID. It'll effectively be like the old horse in the old days. The horse recognises you.
That's my owner, and you can jump on. But the stuff we're talking here, that's what Tesla is doing. $400 billion company. So software can be the great leveler, can't it, in this field?
Oh, true. And what we're aiming for is that our vehicle will have what's called a follow me mode. And in effect, if you're doing parcel deliveries, because of the lightness of the vehicle, because there's no exhaust fumes, it could effectively be going through a shopping centre and just dropping, following the delivery person to each shop and dropping things off, or doing street deliveries or what.
Wow. It opens up a whole new range of possibilities, I suppose. I've read a bit about UPS UPS over the last few years, even with diesel vehicles, has been so fixated on data and streamlining the delivery process for drivers and vehicles to cut costs. And obviously when your fleet is so big. So, if you're doing that with electric vehicles as well, and then adding the autonomous element, you can really maximize, I suppose, returns for business with vehicles like this.
Totally. And, the great thing with our vehicle is that, and I've lost my track of thought there.
Okay. Sorry, we were talking about data collection and using the data to streamline business.
True. Yeah. And part of our trial is actually we're working with Geotab, and whoever's participating in the trial with their fleet will be insisting that not only will the Geotab be fitted to our EVs, but it'll be fitted to the equivalent fossil fuel vehicles. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the trial, if they say, no, we don't want electric vehicles, they'll have all this data about how to use their fossil fuel vehicles more effectively.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, and this is the thing, obviously, businesses, they've purchased internal combustion fossil fuel vehicles, and, they're not just going to flip their whole fleet straight away. They have, they have to phase them out, and they have a time frame that they need to get the return on the investment. But what we need to do is make sure that in that 2, 5, 6 years, whatever, that they're ready to go and they can see the benefits.
And look, the dynamics will change too. Yeah. Typically, I think vehicles at the moment may do up to 10 years, but they're usually 5 years. Electric vehicles, they can just go and go and go because there's nothing to wear. So, lots of opportunities, lots of upsides.
Yeah. So I guess as battery technology is improving rapidly, with your vehicles, are they basically able to be upgraded, or is it sort of plug and play with the battery design? Well, is that sort of secret squirrel?
No, it's not secret squirrel. It's actually that's the clever thing about our vehicle. It was designed as an EV from the ground up, and so effectively, if you want to drop the battery out, you take the protective plate off from underneath the vehicle. The battery drops out. It's about a 10-15 minute operation.
Wow!
But it's not meant for battery swapping.
No, of course.
But what it means is as the battery technology changes, you just whatever you can fit in that space, you can fit in. And we're already working with groups that are promising us 3 times the energy density. So effectively, instead of doing, say, 150 kilometres or 200 kilometres an hour cargo, you'll triple it.
Wow. And that's obviously incredibly simple for your manufacturing process, because as soon as the new technology passes safety regulations and what have you, just ship it and plug it in and make sure the software works and off you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And look, the vehicle really is it's just a tool for moving goods around inexpensively.
Yes.
But it's an energy management solution, you know, and it's got a lot of other things it can do with the data that's collected that can be useful for the grid operators and all the other people in the area.
I think, you know, even myself included, vehicle to grid, we still don't really understand how important this could be.
Well, I can jump in there.
Yeah,
A good example. Yeah, the Hornsdale battery in South Australia. You know, it's paid for itself already.
That's right.
Someone had to fund that battery.
Yeah.
Whereas if government's clever, each person buying a vehicle is effectively funding a battery for the country.
Yes.
And when you set those vehicles up in the energy mesh, you've got a huge virtual storage network, and that can be called on, you know, if there are any problems in the grid.
Right, that's it. And also, you know, like people are starting to get familiar with home batteries, but, you know, for $15,000, $20,000, you're getting a 12 kilowatt hour Tesla battery, I think, but people still have a car parked in their driveway. Most Australian homes do. And that's at least 2 to 3 times what those home batteries are. So there's literally untapped potential, isn't there, in the car that's sitting in the driveway?
Yeah, and effectively, instead of a static battery in your home, you've got a mobile battery.
A mobile one, yeah. And we've seen...
Yeah, and they can run to your house off our vehicle, you know, 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
If you're careful with the energy use.
Yeah. You know, we've seen, unfortunately, with the natural disasters in Australia and the US and things with wildfires, when the power goes out, it's the people with electric vehicles and home batteries and solar who can keep going for a few days.
Yeah, and then you bring that point up. It's really interesting because our partner in the States is closely involved with that.
Oh, fantastic.
And what's happened, as you know, there were 24,000 houses burnt with wildfires a few years ago, and it was started by the grid power lines coming down. And the insurance companies, of course, have said, no, your premiums are going to go up, and if you don't turn off on hot, windy days, we're not going to cover you. So now they have a special announcement over in the States where they're warned that grid's going off today for so many hours, and there's a lot of not quite happy punters over there when they've got their fridges getting warm. So the EV parked in the garage are looking at it as a real solution.
Yeah, and of course there's the small minority of people who've been blaming renewables for those grid outages and not actually looking at the real reason for what was going on, unfortunately.
You've been doing your homework. Yeah, they were actually blaming renewables.
I think I spend too much time on Twitter.
Might be. They're blaming the renewables as driving up power prices in the States, but it was insurance and the fact that the grids had to turn off that prices up. But I think those realities coming home now, and they really understand that an electric vehicle at home is effectively giving you all the energy security you need for your own dwelling.
And I think that's a salient point to make, whether it's the Department of Energy in the US or the energy regulator in Australia. The government here, they say that they know that renewables are cheaper. You know, it's there in writing, it's in numerous documents all over the government websites. So it's not a matter of which side you take, whether you're pro renewables or not. That's just the cold hard facts, you know.
Yeah, it's the economic reality.
The economic reality,
you know, and you know, if you're going to look after the taxpayers, you don't want them spending money needlessly on solutions that are more costly.
Yeah, and this is the thing with electric vehicles as well, at all levels, whether it's government fleet procurement or whether it's, you know, small local councils or whatever. We're starting to see the data that EVs are saving, you know, taxpayers a lot of money in running costs and in longevity.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So what are we looking at in terms of a market launch timeline? Just generally, can you give us some info on that?
Well, if all our monetisation and funding falls in place later this year, we're targeting our first lady who reserved a vehicle in South Australia, being able to drive it home on the 22nd of October next year.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's our target. Our actual vehicle to grid trial is set to start around August next year. That'll be separate, totally separate from what we're doing. The factory will be being assembled and put together throughout the year, and the vehicles for vehicle to grid trial will be assembled similar to how we did in Brisbane.
Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate at the moment.
little bit busy, but it's a good busy.
Yeah, and as you say, you're not just a vehicle manufacturer. You've got so much happening in the energy space. It's really wonderful to see that.
We're an energy management solution.
Yeah.
Manufacturer.
It's really wonderful to see that from an Australian company. Yeah. I hope if there are any VCs in the US watching this, they can throw some money your way.
Well, anything like that's appreciated, and we do know we're being watched around the globe with what we're doing, because we're in a different space. We're not trying to be a high-end vehicle.
No.
It's an affordable vehicle. None of our vehicles are over 40,000. So
that's really wonderful to hear. And obviously, if people start to see the commercial vehicles getting around, dropping off their parcels and things like that, that's going to tweak their interest into what other products are on offer and what the market is doing. Because part of it is just acceptance, isn't it? It's accepting the change.
It is, and what's being floated around all the time is range anxiety, and people are still in the mindset you've got to go to a petrol station or a charging station to fill a vehicle, whereas everything's at home. And the other thing is the cost. Well, the cost now is dropping quickly globally, and it's evidenced with our vehicle costs, and the effect that you need a charge point before you can have an EV. Well, you don't. In the UK, 90% of people, well over 80%, but 90% charge at home. We've got friends over there that in our project, Tesla, he said he's charged it once or twice at a charge point. The rest of the time, just quietly at night.
That's
and
it.
general trickle, which is better for the battery anyway.
Well, exactly. And a lot of people will go, not everyone has a parking space, or not everyone has, off-street parking, blah, blah, blah. But, we've seen, I think in the ACT, there's a lot of change towards strata and apartment buildings putting in charging points for their owners. And I actually had a Tesla. I don't own an EV, but I had a Tesla for a week last month, and plugged it in at 5 o'clock. And by 7 a.m. the next morning, it had done 65% back up to 85% charge. So it's fine. Unless you're out of the house every 2 or 3 hours, if you plug it in at night, it's fine.
Yeah. And look, one of our associates in Victoria drove from Melbourne up to Hervey Bay.
Yeah.
In his cost him $20. The only place he had to plug in for it was at one of the charge points here in the resort.
Yeah.
And used the charge points all the way up. He said, easy. He said, he drives around the K, pull up, have a coffee.
That's it.
Car filled, and then you're off again.
And I know the cost of supercharging has recently gone up in Australia and around the world, but it's still, I think, about half the price to 60% of the cost of fueling a car for a trip like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, Greg, look, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks for joining us on EV Brief, and we look forward to following ACV in the future.
Thank you, mister. I appreciate it, and you have a great day.
And that's it for episode 28 of EV Brief, in conversation with Greg McGarvie of Ace EV. I hope you enjoyed our chat today. Please subscribe and leave a review on your favourite podcasting platform, and check out evbrief.com for all the latest EV news content. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. My name's Jonathan, and I'll see you next week.